We only have one project on the agenda tonight, and that is 1141 Bennington Street. I'm not sure who's presenting first.
Well, my name's Lou Tabaya. I'm one of the owners of the site at the old New England Casket site. And first, I'd like to thank everyone for letting us speak tonight and taking the time to hear us. And thank you for the comments that came through. We are looking at these comments seriously as we progress through this project.
Yeah, and Tony, if it's okay with you, we think we can hopefully just turn that over to the design team to talk about the presentation and walk everybody through, and then obviously happy to address any and all questions tonight. Well,
Sure, sounds great.
Share my screen. Everyone see our screen?
Yep.
So this is our first design review. Happy to make this an interactive discussion. We can run through this pretty quickly. We've added a few things since we last met at the Orient Heights neighborhood meeting, mainly as they revolved around what does the plan look like without the Plan East Boston road changes. And so we can kind of breeze through this first section quickly because I'm assuming everyone's familiar with the site and we distributed on Monday, but please stop us if you want to see more of that. This was a photo of the community presentation that we did, and then really the goals of this project, enhancing that pedestrian streetscape that's really non-existent on Bennington, especially where Bennington meets Palermo on the side that is nearest to the MBTA tracks. Using the corner of the site and the tip of the site to really create an active programmed space for retail and cafe, which we've been hearing the community really wants that type of space, both indoors and outdoors. And then looking at how we use the building design and design the building to really complement the scale of Orient Heights and the commercial corridor that is Bennington Street. And then really restoring the street network, pedestrian connections, the landscape, maximizing those opportunities along the edge of Belle Isle Marsh, as well as the site right now, and creating a really nice buffer for pedestrians as they're moving along the street, and sustainability, which we can get into more later. Just to remind everybody of the program, 221 apartments, got a little under 1,200 square feet of retail. We can go back to this time. And then the project as it relates to the desired greenway connections, both kind of along Bennington Street and then around Constitution Beach, anticipating those potential connections that could occur both to the north and south of the site. So we've really pulled the building back and the site back to allow those connections to happen. Project site is outlined in black. Belle Isle Marsh is here. Bennington Street running along at the top of this page, and then you can see the connections to the different transit lines. Again, slow me down if I'm going too fast, but I don't want to repeat the same thing we repeated at the neighborhood meeting. We'll run through these pretty quickly because we've got the renderings later, but basically there's almost a 30-foot grade change from Bennington Street to the portion of the site that really is not accessible and is farther away from Bennington Street, borders the MBTA rail yard. The view at the tip of the site, and this is really where it's our only place where our building connects to Bennington Street and actually touches Bennington Street, is along the sidewalk. And so what the design team has done to focus their attention as we've left, you can see on the plans, we've left this existing curb and are basically proposing a landscape buffer so that as you negotiate this grade to Palermo Street and then around Palermo Street to the marsh, you're protected from Bennington Street as you're moving as a pedestrian, and that also creates a really nice buffer for the retail space at the corner of the site. Again, you can see the pretty extreme grade change as soon as the sidewalk ends. It drops off about 8 feet and then another 10 to 20 feet below the site. And part of our focus is really how do we improve Austin Avenue, which is a gravel road, a lot of runoff going into the marsh, a lot of trash buildup along this edge, and then making this into a place, part of that street network of East Boston. So it feels like a nice place to walk, to hang out, to overlook it. This diagram was included in what we distributed on Monday. So again, kind of the site here. MBTA property is in blue, and so we have quite a bit of a setback from most of Bennington Street by the MBTA tracks along the back of the site. And then this portion is shared between DCR and the site.
Yeah, I would just add that we're working with both the MBTA and DCR to get buy-in on the improvements that we're going to be talking about tonight as well.
And then to walk you through the plans, this is the Google Earth image of the site as it exists today. So the black line is the property line. You can see the existing sidewalk coming around over the bridge as the T line, the tracks stuck under. Palermo Street is right here, and then Bellar Marsh is page south. What we wanted to show you after the neighborhood meeting last week or a couple weeks ago, what does this our planned improvements look like without Plan East Boston? And so basically the sidewalk comes in here and then it jogs in up against the property line, and we've created a really nice kind of tree-lined buffer between that sidewalk and the entry of the retail and the outdoor area of the retail from the street, so that people can sit here, they can feel comfortable, you can feel like you can occupy the space for longer, and actually, enjoy the sun and hang out. So this is what the plan looks like.
Can I just say that this does include the adjustments to Palermo
Yeah.
Street, because that would be part of our project, and we feel like that is a significant public improvement there.
And then, if Plan East Boston goes forward in the alignment that they had, the document that the city put out, this is what that would look like. And we heard loud and clear that the community didn't love that median. So, because that's a separate portion that we're not really having the ability to affect, we just wanted to show it kind of with and without. Basically, our project is divided into two buildings that are connected by a one-story bridge right here, which is very not visible from Bennington Street. And then the buildings kind of angle on each floor and bend away from the street in order to create a more dynamic streetscape along Bennington Street. The ground floor, and this is at the level of Austin Avenue, and so it's basically about 20 feet lower from Bennington Street is this the ground level with the parking, and we're using that grade change to our advantage to really screen that from Bennington Street. So if you think about this as being pretty much almost on the elevation of the T line, it's a little bit elevated, but it's still below the grade change of Bennington Street, which is to our advantage.
Yeah, the top of that, the floor above this would be, or the bottom of the floor above this would be just above the catenary lines. So that the residents and what you see from from Bennington Street is more of an occupied building.
And so we're really using this as your main residential entrance. So we have two areas here, which Sean and Christine, our landscape architects, will talk about in a minute, of the drop-off zones, and then residents can get into the buildings from this lobby here. If they're walking, they can come up from above, and then the secondary entry for the building is right here as well, with a small turnaround here. And again, kind of taking advantage of how do we minimize the road, especially on Austin Avenue. So not many people will be going down it except to access this building and to drive to this building or to bike to the building, and then maximize the area for landscape and trees all along Austin Avenue.
At the same time, we did want to keep Austin Avenue, the architecture along Austin Avenue, as active and occupied spaces, so that we didn't get garage. The garage, as we mentioned, is really facing the MBTA lots.
And then the ground floor plan where we meet Bennington Street, where we have the chance to actually create an entrance into the building. We have the residential lobby and the leasing, the retail space right here. And then we have a deck, which is shown in more detail on some subsequent pages that wraps around so that you can get views and glimpses to the marsh. You can see here where the bridge connects in for the residents. So if you live in this building, you can come across here and then exit and walk to either T-stop here. Typical upper floor plan. I'll turn it over to either Sean or Christine to walk through some of the landscape.
Thanks, Amy. I'll take it from here. Christine Wilson, Copley Wolf Design Group, landscape architect. So I'll just start up on Bennington Street, the sidewalk crossing the blue line, coming to the lobby that Amy discussed. Just again, reiterating that we pulled it away from the street to really get down under 5% for accessibility and to really widen the sidewalk adjacent to the building with seat walls, and then this buffer between the vehicular, bike traffic and the pedestrian space. And then this green space with trees is going to shade that asphalt of the roadway, which helps mitigate the urban heat island effect. Cools temperatures, right, in our increasingly hot summers. So then coming around the retail space, as Amy pointed out, there's that change in color between the tan, which represents kind of the sidewalk, concrete color, and then we have this specialty paving, that gray zone, which is this patio that overlooks to the page south, overlooks Belle Isle Marsh, and takes advantage of that grade change, right, with that vista. And then down below there, the landscape, the green landscape is terraced, again, some flexible open space to lay out, sit out, enjoy the sun and the views. So from that gray zone, if you're to walk, out towards this new T 90-degree intersection that's shown between Bennington and Palmero, that new sidewalk, again, under 5%, which is just, it's much more gentle for anyone walking along, wheelchairs, etc. It's just going to be, it's going to be much nice. Much nicer to kind of walk around the space and down to Palmero and Austin Ave. So at the bottom there, Palmero to the right and Austin to the left. And the streetscape continues along that north side that is being pointed out right there to that front entry down on Austin Ave. And so as the plan East Boston actually had the bike path along the north side of the street, but this project is looking at moving it, coordinating again with DCR and everything on moving it to the Belle Isle side of the street, and that's going to help reduce the conflicts with the pedestrians and bicycles and everyone on the north side, and really just make it an enjoyable space to walk or to bike along the Belle Isle Marsh, right adjacent to that green open space. And speaking of which, we're looking at bringing those trees and the vegetation over to this site. You see all the green canopy, all the green space below this building on the south side. And that's really just trying to bring the Belle Isle Marsh into the site. There's, fortunately right now, like invasive vegetation. So looking at how to mitigate, enhance, improve this green space and respond to it, to again, take advantage of the trees that provide the cooling, and also wildlife habitat, and looking at how we can create a planting scheme that provides seasonal interest, but is also responsive to this site, this salty, coastal environment. Again, we're really excited about the ability to expand and enhance Belle Isle Marsh onto this property. So as we move left down towards the MBTA property, I'm just going to point out that we have sorry, I'm going to back up a little bit. There's the MBTA property, there's green space that wraps up and around. And we have columnar trees with some verticality to really green up the edge on the left as well as on the top. Right, exactly. And so then at the top of the site, it's called out as a transformer. And we're really excited about looking at opportunities to screen it, maybe use some art and kind of hide it. I mean, it's below the Bennington Street, but it's also an opportunity to create some graphic interest as one comes from Austin Ave into the where it says parking access. So speaking of that intersection right there, that trapezoidal area, that's kind of a darker green. It is quite wide, but that's just accommodating all the truck turning through that zone. There's the guest like parking, Uber drop off, deliveries, all that, we're accommodating that. And again, we're trying to enhance the pedestrian experience, make it a safer site for pedestrians, more comfortable by looking at details like the change in pavement. So that's the color change between the light, the tan color and the dark gray there. So again, I think that summarizes kind of the walk around the site. And Amy, is there anything I should hit on before we move to the next slide? Okay, great. So it's kind of hard to read some plans sometimes. So looking at this site in section, this is the site from the lobby over to Bennington. So the building is on the left side of this section, this cross section, and then the space where people are hanging out and sitting on the seawall, that's about a foot down from below the Bennington Street. And you can see that, so there's the tree planted green buffer that separates the kind of people space from the bike lane. And then there's a bike buffer between the bike and the car. And that's all raised about 6 inches above the car. Again, kind of protecting, buffering the bicycles from the car. If we move on to the next section, this is cut. If you're looking from that new T intersection that connects Bennington to Palmero, it's looking back towards the building, back towards that retail space. So you see that grade change across the site. And so on the left-hand side, that's Austin Ave with a new streetscape, that tree lined green buffer that separates the vehicles and the pedestrians, and then the terrace lawn that comes up to the patio outside the retail. And so we're looking at creating these really wonderful planted open spaces that really protect and create nice seating areas in there and adds more green to the site. And then on the right there is kind of that steeper grade change up to Bennington Street. Again, all accessible walkways and connections. And so then kind of turning 90 degrees, going from the building on the left-hand side through that terrace, again, those pockets of green space and, large shade trees that separate the terrace from, the walking spaces. This is relatively flat, right, as we move from the building through that new T intersection on the right there. So then finally, moving all the way around to the kind of the front entrance off of Austin Ave. We have the building on the left, the planted buffer, that foundation planting, and then the generous, wide sidewalk with a planting strip, shade tree that buffers the people and the cars, Austin Ave, and then that bike lane that I talked about along Belle Isle Marsh, that's on the right-hand side, again, with a buffer, 3-foot buffer, similar to up on Bennington Street. As far as the planting palette, we're looking at native plant species. We're also looking at hardy plant species that are going to, people are moving around, bikes moving around. We want to make sure that the planting isn't, too fragile and really will thrive in this environment. And we also want to create a planting palette where there's various textures and colors, throughout the different seasons. Even in the winter, there's still some green out there. So this is just a small sample of species, the plants that will be out there. It will be a much more robust palette that will correspond to, will respond to what's in Belle Isle Marsh as far as the natives. Again, there are some invasives out there, so we're really looking at improving the planting in this area, making it much more diverse, and again, visually interesting as well as really wonderful from an ecological perspective.
And for sustainability, we are proposing this as an all-electric building, LEED Gold, looking at, as Christine mentioned, really the heat island effect and how do we maximize landscape, not just at the ground, but up on that, our second floor of the building too, screening the parking to minimize the urban heat island, and then really kind of plant as many trees as we can within our expanded public realm in the open space. We're looking at resiliency for the site, and are there ways to protect the tracks towards that MBTA side of the site by lifting the grade up slightly to begin to create a more resilient link in with them. And we've been in discussion with them about that, and then extending the habitat of the wildlife in the area, and obviously addressing kind of the EV charging as well. So for the building design, we were really inspired by this change in light, the seasonality of the site, and how could we create a building that began to change with the seasons, change depending on your point of view and your perspective and your approach to this building. So it's really experienced actually through many different speeds, and then from many different kind of vantage points. So mostly you're approaching this from Bennington Street, from the MBTA train, and then from Orient Heights itself. And so from the Bennington Street facade, this is the side of the more southern facing building. And so we were really looking at how could we create undulation within the facade that began to change over the course of the day with shadows that were cast along the facade and create these slightly larger recesses and setbacks within that facade to both break up the scale and create these outdoor rooms and porches for the residences. So from this side, we're cutting off and cropping off the T below, but the building presents itself as 4 stories with a darker kind of 5th story setback on the top. So then over the course of the day, what we're proposing is there's a series of kind of shadows and a changing nature of this facade, depending on the light and how the sun begins to track across that facade. So you begin to get a different read depending on night, day, March, summer, winter, across those seasons. From Bennington Street itself, this is the current view and the current experience. Walking up Bennington Street to the north towards Riviera, Orient Heights is on the left, the tracks are on the right. It's a pretty limited public realm right now, so we're not able to affect this too much. We photoshopped in kind of what the building would look like and how much you would see of that building from that streetscape experience too. And then kind of the aerial view of that site. So you can see the site with Boston in the background, Belle Isle Marsh, Orient Heights to the right. And then really thinking about how we can improve the edge of the site that does touch Bennington Street and improve that. And so again, greening up as much as we can. Ideally, we're integrating some green on both the courtyard level for the south building, as well as on some of the residential terraces, because we have a number of setbacks. And so our goal is to look at the facade design and subtly shift it back in plan, creating a series of terraces that both can be occupied with either landscape and create that depth and shadow and that play of light across the year. The view looking south along Bennington Street as it currently exists today, and then what it would look like. We mocked in the plan East Boston roadway conditions. Obviously, those don't happen. You would see kind of this green edge which we are basically aligns with that existing curb line right here. And then from this view, our goal is to create a really porous and transparent first floor. So you get glimpses through to the marsh and the landscape beyond as you're moving along Bennington Street, through the retail space, through the lobby, through that sectional difference as it goes from Bennington Street down to Austin Avenue. And then materiality, really looking at a very rich, kind of warm terracotta-like material that begins to work with and relate to the some of the brick structures that are along Bennington Street, and really create kind of a nice depth and a sense of scale there.
Yeah, I think this is a good view to kind of illustrate how the bends and the planning of the building reduce the length of the facades and the scale of the building from different vantage points.
And the view walking kind of along Bennington Street sidewalk, Belle Marsh is to the left, Morgan Heights and the hills to the right. And then you can see as you begin to approach it, how the retail begins to reveal itself in that commercial space, and then really trying to create this outdoor room that the patio for the retail and that outdoor deck and overlook is kind of situated within the landscape. So really kind of framed by landscape, you enter this space, hopefully it begins to buffer some of the noise of the road and create a nice place for residents of all of Orient Heights to really hang out and gather. And the view coming from basically where Palermo Street intersects Bennington Street. You can see kind of that sidewalk as it begins to come around. And so looking at a mix again of that kind of more richer terracotta-like material with a lighter white fiber cement siding that will reflect the light and the shadows as the sun tracks across the course of the day. Really taking advantage of that curve too. So, and then as you move closer to the retail entry, you can see the patio on the left. We're looking at a gray kind of brick that again creates kind of a mottled kind of rich tone at the base that is then framed out by kind of a wood canopy and wood and dark metal canopy at the top, and then you can see the residential above. And so again, kind of these subtle shifts in the residential facade, which break up the scale, create some visual interest, and really kind of create a nice level of detail as we move around the building. That's it. Happy to open it up for questions or discussion.
We did have one question in the chat right at the beginning of the presentation, asking about from a transit-oriented aspect, will the project keep the sidewalks clear to either T-stop?
So I'll be happy to try to answer that. So is the question, would we actually shovel the sidewalk from this project all the way down to the T station? Is that the question? It sounds like yes. That's not the anticipation. We would obviously maintain the sidewalk in front of our building. Obviously, we want our residents to get there safely. It's a public sidewalk. We would anticipate that the city would try to do their best to maintain it, but that's something we haven't really thought about. If it becomes an issue and it's not being maintained, yes, we will actually have a piece of machinery go all the way down if necessary.
We had a question about the design of the building not being one continuous building, but being two separate ones.
Yeah, the main reason was to create some view corridors from the hill of Orient Heights through the center of the site. We actually did start with one long building, and we felt like that was too much of a wall is too strong of a word that it presented itself to Bennington Street. So we really did want to break it up into two buildings that felt like they were more in scale with the community of East Boston.
We have another traffic related question from Patricia Venezia asking, will the traffic flow into the small neighborhoods such as Palermo and Swan next door?
I don't think our traffic engineer is on, and if they are, could you speak up? I don't see it. I don't think so. No, we've done a traffic study. It's included as part of our EPNF. There is no reason why somebody would be going into that neighborhood based upon the improvements that are going to occur on Palermo and Bennington Street. The intention is going to be to get out of the site as quickly as possible, not to traverse through a neighborhood for no reason.
Larry Zola added another comment on the snow removal on the sidewalks, saying currently walkers pack the snow to the point where it is very hard to remove after the snowfall. Now we will have many more walkers and potential lawsuits from people slipping.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, you know, it's a public city sidewalk. We anticipate some level of city service. If that service is not being provided, we will ultimately end up maintaining that and removing the snow. We do that on a number of locations to make sure that it's safe for our residents and the residents in the adjacent, you know, neighborhoods.
I see that Gail, you have your hand raised. Did you want to comment on?
Yeah, I have, this is a huge project. At the get-go, I don't think it enhances the nature of the neighborhood. You are obviously building a project that would benefit only your residents in terms of their views. But meanwhile, you've created a huge wall so that opposite Bennington Street, those people are not going to see any views, and they are going to now be looking at a 5-story building. So from our perspective, it doesn't meet the needs of the iPod that we're all operating under now. And I don't think, and it's way out of scale in terms of what our zoning is, despite this being an Article 80 project, it doesn't fit in with our neighborhood. We're all 3-deckers there, 1 and 2 families, the 3-deckers being grandfathered in. So you're taking a commercial site, making it residential with no applicability of the residential mandates. So I think, we find that somewhat offensive that, obviously you're making your site look wonderful and meanwhile impacting everybody else that surrounds the neighborhood. And I'd like to sort of do some particulars. So that's one. And if you were to cut down.
Gail, can we go step by step, because it's going to be hard
Yeah.
for me to respond to stuff. So
Yeah.
I think number one, you mentioned a lot of things in there. So
Well, there's a lot to discuss. I mean, we can't do it in one design review meeting. That's just not happening.
There absolutely is, but I also want to be respectful and try to answer your questions. And I think it would be more difficult, to because you've listed already a number of things and I forgot half of them already. So would you mind just kind of taking a step back, and I'll be happy to address any and all of your concerns as
Well,
best
first of all, it's a 5-story building.
Yes.
So, and you are impacting the views and sort of the view corridor of all the butters across the street. So I find that offensive and disrespectful because you're not taking into consideration what they've looked out to. Even the buildings from the casket company weren't as high as this is. So you can address that.
Yeah, no problem. So number one, when we approached this design originally, as Amy addressed, views are obviously sensitive to us, and at the same time, this is private property and we have the right to build. So one of the first things we did when we took a look at the massing was we broke up the massing, and that's why you're not seeing one building here. You're seeing 2 buildings that have been placed in order to maintain view corridors through the building. And I think, your comments about scale and height, there are people, and I've heard multiple times people saying that, 4-story buildings are too tall, 5-story buildings are too tall, 6-story buildings are too tall. And, we're in an urban context here. And I do want to address the triple deckers as well, too. We're in an urban context here. This site is separated from the neighborhood by a very wide street, including a railroad right-of-way. It is also located directly access to public transportation. We live in one of the most expensive cities in the United States, and there's 2 reasons why that is. first is people want to live in the city because the jobs are here and it's a great environment. And two, we don't have enough housing. What we're doing here, we believe, is appropriate in terms of scale. And at the same time, by saying that, you know, the building is too tall, my assumption is you're saying that it should be shorter. And then what I believe, what that really means is you're saying that we shouldn't be building this housing, which we critically need, which also means we shouldn't be building the affordable housing that comes along with it. So absolutely.
Let me just stop you right there. We are looking at 10,000 units at Suffolk Downs. So I find it offensive again to have people tell us we don't have enough housing. So that's 10,000 that hasn't even been maxed out yet. And you're coming along with another project that's for the neighborhood. It is too tall. It's not the neighborhood we live in.
Well, and so regarding the 10,000 units, that's something that probably will get built out over 30 years or 20 years or whatever the number is. To state that we're going to be building 10,000 units is not. This submarket, and when I say this submarket, I'm talking about the blue line submarket has added on average somewhere between 200 to 500 units per year since about 2015, and that includes Revere as well too. Everything that has been added has been absorbed, and during that same period of time, the prices of housing have gone up and the rents have gone up, and that's because we're not adding enough housing to our built city. And so my comments are not meant to be offensive in any way, Gail, but
Well, that's how we receive them here in the community, where you know our activism here. So we're trying to cut down the luxury housing. I mean, your 13% is a drop in the bucket for the needs of our community that's currently living here. You know, these massive housing developments are gentrifying our neighborhood. We're not having replacement housing, and this is only seeks to make it worse. It's not really making it better. I get your theories, but it's not our theories.
It's adding supply, Gail, and it's adding supply both to the market rate side and also the affordable side. I wouldn't consider 13% a drop in the bucket.
How many units is that? How many units is that?
How many units? 13%, 221, give you the exact number.
About 20, right? 20 something. So regardless, it's not a big number. And we have displacement going on here in our neighborhood that is severe, it's hurtful, and it's dislocating people every minute we speak. So 21 units can't even match the dislocation rate that we're facing here.
Yeah,
it just
Gail,
can't.
Everybody has to do their part. One project will not solve the inequities that we all experience and see happening in this city, but we're doing our part here. And as you talk about displacement, one of the things that we have done as a company, and I know you're aware of the projects that we do, we have never once acquired a piece of property and directly displaced anybody. We are looking at industrial sites that are fronting urban squares, such as 355 Bennington. We are taking parking lots that have been vacant for 50 years on Revere Beach. We are looking at, we're replacing we're replacing storage for 1,000 cars at Addison Street with 230 homes, including inclusionary housing. And now we're looking at an industrial site that has its own issues and its own challenges, that sits 30 feet below grade of Bennington Street, and replacing it with needed housing. So we are not directly displacing housing, and
build your housing lower. You can still get the density, but build your housing lower. You don't have to go five stories from the surface level. That's what's problematic. Your people are still going to get their views of the marsh potentially, yes. And if not, they don't.
So once again, building the housing lower. So a number of things. We need to provide parking, so that takes up a floor. We can't go underground, and we believe the scale, based upon where the building is located, contextually fits into an urban context. By building it lower, you're basically saying build less housing, build less affordable housing. And we feel what we're proposing in terms of scale works. And that's why we're here to talk about this stuff.
Well, I
But
think you can stretch another floor underneath these buildings. Even 4 stories, I'm sorry, is too high. You're talking in urban context. Yeah, we get that, but we're not in a neighborhood where you can come along and should think about doing that. Where you're at Addison, maybe the Revere Beach, but this is not Revere Beach. This is not Addison. This is highly developed as 1 and 2 family units. So now you're just, maximizing, the ability to do so with the nod from the BPDA. But in our neighborhood, our zoning is very much protected here.
yes, and we're not in your zoning. And so
Well,
that's.
well, you are.
No,
You
we're
are.
not. This
You're
is
across the street. You're across the street.
It is.
It's a technicality.
Not a technicality.
It's a
Gail.
matter of semantics.
This is
a
not
matter
a one single family. You have single family zoning with 5,000 square foot lots at the top of Orion Heights Hill. You have 3 family and 2 family zoning in other parts of East Boston. And to talk about.
But it's not here. It's
No, but
not here.
Yes, and this is not. This is a PDA. This is an approved PDA for the use that we're talking about. And let's talk about the triple deckers. There's such an important component to this neighborhood and to many neighborhoods throughout the city. But here's one thing. When this building gets built, it's going to be here for 100 years in the same way those triple deckers have been here. The triple deckers, when they were built as an economical solution that took up a lot of land. And in essence, we have no more land in the city of Boston in order to build and provide housing for what we need. So
Oh,
taking.
there's plenty. There's
No,
plenty.
no, there is,
Just
Gail.
go across the pond.
There is-
We're maximizing what we have in East Boston. It's a nightmare. It's getting to be a nightmare here. And you know that. Just drive down any street at any hour of the day. We're strangled now.
And if
absolutely.
you're talking about a nightmare, are you referring to having people around using local area businesses, bringing new retailers? Is that a nightmare or what's
We're destroying all our retail, mind you, because everybody's selling for these big developments. We're
That's-
losing our retail.
and let's talk about retail. If you go to Revere Beach right now, you're going to find 3 new restaurants on Revere Beach. The reason why those new restaurants exist on Revere Beach is because we, as the owner, absolutely subsidized every single one of them in order to bring new retailers in. It has changed the look and feel of Revere Beach. It's become a different place, an admirable place. We're doing the exact same thing here for this retail space. We are not looking to make top dollar or even break even on this retail. We're going to be subsidizing the rent. We're going to be subsidizing the tenant improvement allowance to find the best retailer that works for the community and working with the community to do that. So,
We're just talking, we can dissect each and every comment.
absolutely.
It's one retail space, maybe 2, one retail space.
It's one retail space. And if we had more frontage and if we weren't 30 feet below Bennington Street, I would be talking to you and asking if you guys like more retail space. At 355 Bennington Street, there's an incredible need for an urban grocer. And that's what we're focusing on right now in order to try to bring an urban grocer to that neighborhood. And we have the space to try to do that. We don't have the space here because we don't have the frontage on Bennington Street due to the challenges of the site. That said, we want to bring a retailer that the community appreciates, will use, and adds vibrancy to the neighborhood.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I just know in our neighborhood, we're not happy about a 5-story building on that site, regardless of if it was industrial. It should remain industrial, quite frankly. We're even losing our industrial sites. So, basically, we're going to be a kind of a homogeneous kind of look in East Boston once the developers get through here. We're losing all commercial spaces.
You're actually not, Gail, because what's
Oh,
happening.
we are. Oh, we are.
There are certain uses that potentially don't function in a city anymore. When the zoning was originally established, there was a different view. You have Suffolk Downs is going to be the new commercial hub, and I know a lot of people don't like that and have issues with that.
We need neighborhood stores. That's what we're lacking now. We have restaurants, yes, but we don't have you know, the little bakeries, the this, that, there's so much we don't have anymore.
Well,
I
you
mean,
know,
talk to anybody that's lived here. Don't talk to me.
well, you know what? We're providing a subsidized deal. So if you can bring us your favorite baker, we will structure an amazing lease deal for them here so they can service the neighborhood.
Yeah, well, you know, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure you can find your own bakers, but regardless, we just believe it's basically too dense for the neighborhood. And, you know, you actually showed a building diagonally across the street as another 5-story building. That's not been approved. It's not gone through the process, but yet you showed it as though it's there, it's sitting there. It's a 2-story building.
I don't, well, if there was something there, I didn't show it intentionally. Maybe it was to understand context, and I don't even know what you're referring to. There are a number of projects that are not approved. And somebody had made an earlier comment, and this is a comment we wanted to address, that all these things are going to be happening at once. 10,000 units happening, and you know, laboratory buildings getting built in Suffolk Downs, and the project kitty corner to us is going to get built. This is not all going to happen at once. As I mentioned to you earlier, this entire submarket, which has a population of over 80,000 people, I'm talking about East Boston and Revere together, if not more, has added on average 250 to 500 units of housing per year, and it has all been absorbed, and prices continue to go up. That's because we don't have enough housing. And this market is naturally constrained because we don't have enough land and we don't have the ability to grow here. And for us, building new residential homes, including affordable homes, on an older industrial site that is partially below grade in terms of Bennington Street, with direct access to transportation, this is where this type of development we believe belongs. It doesn't belong.
Yeah, but you're building in a floodplain. You're actually building in a floodplain when we have a marsh that's not going to have any chance to migrate. So you're impeding the health of the marsh, looking forward 20, 30 years. And that's a problem for the marsh. So no one really cares about it. You're caring about the views. We're caring about the integrity of the natural resource.
No, Gail, we absolutely care about the integrity of the natural resource. And in your discussion with Councilor Edwards' office, we have agreed to extend our comment period and to have a very, very specific discussion about the marsh. Last time we spoke, I made some promises to you and to the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh, and those are promises that we're going to maintain. We are currently interviewing wetland scientists and getting proposals. Those proposals will be shared with you and the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh to select the best wetland scientist in order to study the existing condition.
We've been studying that. We're ahead of you on that. We've had our scientists too. You know, we paid them out of our pocket. So it's not like we don't know what we're talking about here.
Well, we're happy to compare notes. Our commitment, we are not impacting this. And number one, the notion of migration of the marsh, this site was never part of the marsh. And at the same time, as it relates to floodplain, it's part of the 100-year floodplain. According to our historical records and the discussions with the Tobiah family, regardless of the storm, this site has never flooded in its history.
It may not have, but it's going to. So we're looking at all low-lying. Yeah, we're looking at low-lying areas. They're going to be flooded. And why is the city now? We have the city zeroing in on Constitution Beach and Belle Isle Marsh in terms of climate resiliency. So you're coming in with a project, and we haven't even finished those discussions. So your project is really premature.
No, it's not actually, because we're coordinating with the city on that, and that's going to be part of our discussion as well too when we present to you and the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh. And we also have additional ideas that we believe are going to address some of the concerns. So marsh specific related stuff, there is much more to come. We understand that's a huge important factor for you. It's an important factor for us, and we want to address it properly.
And another question, how far, and I don't mean to monopolize this, but there's so much discussion that needs to happen. And I just, you know, I feel like I have a lot of questions. They're going to be maybe dealt with in different forums. But you talk about Palermo Street. Where is your boundary ending on Palermo Street?
When you say our boundary, what do you mean by that?
Your boundary. Where is your boundary ending on Palermo?
You mean our
Where, yeah, where's your abutting
Let us
property?
show,
line?
let us show you. The black dotted line you see is our actual property line. All of the new green trees that are shown there is us doing work off of our property line on either private road or city-owned property.
Well, first of all, that half of Austin Ave, has been widened, so we're not sure how and why. Secondly, how do you propose to
Which
do
part of-
your
which part of
activities?
Austin Ave? Which part of Austin Ave? I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
All of Austin Ave has been greatly widened. I'm not sure who's done that. I don't think they've done it with permitting through the Conservation Commission at all. And so it's questionable where all the boundaries are, and particularly where the area of critical environmental concern boundary is. So we're talking about this and we don't really have any idea where that boundary is, because our records show,
The boundary
goes-
for the ACEC?
yeah, it's not a clear cut line there on
Well,
Austin Ave.
it's not shown on this drawing, but we're happy to share you all of our environmental studies to show you exactly where that boundary is.
Yeah, well, do you have the overlay of the ACEC?
Yeah, not on this presentation, but once
Well,
again,
that's what
we're going to
we
have a
need to-
specific marsh presentation, and we will 100% have an overlay of the ECEC for you. Absolutely.
Right, well, that's a concern. And then half of this street that you're navigating and landscaping is half owned, as you mentioned, by DCR. So I don't know how much of this street you anticipate taking over.
We're
I
not
mean,
taking over any of this street. We are only making physical building improvements within our property line. Everything else you see there is publicly accessible surface improvements that would need to get done with the permission of PIC as it relates to city-owned property, and as it relates to private property, such as our half of the private way and DCR's half of the private way, would need to be done in coordination with them. We are going to be having a lot of discussions and hopefully jointly with DCR to talk about improvements.
well, yeah, and when you're talking to DCR, I mean, really, Friends of Belle Isle should be at the table, honestly,
Yes.
because they don't have the boots on the ground. We have a site supervisor who has boots on the ground. But, when we're talking to the administration, they don't know the locale like we do, like we've been looking at for 35 years. So we have a lot of grave concerns, I think. And, obviously those needs need to be met. You're creating an impervious surface, which goes against the grain of, sort of funneling water into the marsh and things like that. You may have an answer for that, but that's a
Okay.
big concern.
Yeah, we're, like I said, we're going to have a very specific marsh
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
And you guys
All
are
right.
welcome to any discussion with DCR. We encourage it, and we're going to outline a strategy that we're going to propose to the Friends of Bella Marsh of how we can hopefully work together to address some of these issues.
We've
All
had-
right, I'm sorry to take up so much time. So, but obviously this design review, I don't think can happen in one meeting, so.
We don't expect it to.
We've had a couple questions that have been in the chat for a few minutes. Both of them are related to the height of the building from our discussion earlier. Joanne Mahoney had said, excuse me, what is the compromise to these concerns on building height? And Patricia Venezia said, will you commit to keeping the height the same as the casket company was?
I'm sorry, what was the first question?
It was also related to compromising on the building height. So it was just
The first question is that the casket was a single story building. We're clearly proposing a building that's taller, so we are not committed to keeping to the height of the casket company, because otherwise we would be showing you a building that's below grade on Bennington Street. And the project would be completely infeasible. We would have a parking garage.
Okay, we have another question from Larry Zola saying the site use as an infrastructure staging area is very useful. Where will that type of needed use move to?
So that's a good question. So that's a temporary use and request by the vendor because they're servicing obviously infrastructure improvements. I don't have an exact schedule. Maybe Lou does, but that need is going to end. Lou, do you have any idea on when you think those guys are wrapping up? their work? Sorry to put
Yeah.
you on the spot if you don't
No,
mind.
no problem. Yeah, we talked to them. They needed some space temporarily to lay down their supplies for doing the work in the street. And, you know, I don't anticipate them being there any more than 6 to 12 months. And they can get up and leave tomorrow if they have to.
We had a comment from Giselle saying, as an Orient Heights resident, I'd rather look at this than a hole in the ground or industrial building. I would like the Bennington Street side to look better instead of the existing green wall there now.
We would too, and thank you for that comment. And you know, one of the things we're going to do, and obviously you can't nail all the details day one. We don't like that green wall either, and we will obviously try to work. It's not our property. We will try to work with the MBTA on seeing if there's any ability to improve that.
I see Joanne Mahoney, you have your hand up. Did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Tony. I just have a couple of questions. First, I don't understand about the building being split. I don't get it. So the BPDA recommended the building like this instead of one continuous building. Is that what you were saying, or am I not understanding that correctly?
No, that's correct, Joanne. We originally proposed a single building, and obviously it's a long, thin site.
Right.
BPDA's perspective was they wanted to maintain, you know, the view corridors, more view corridors off of Bennington Street. So they asked us to.
Oh, I see. View corridors off Bennington Street so people could see into the marsh area, you mean?
Exactly, yes, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying that because I couldn't understand the view corridors. I was like, why, what is there? Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks. I think it would be look great as one continuous building curved. I think it would be really pretty, but hey, it's the BPDA. But anyway, the Bennington Street that is there now, the sidewalk itself, is that going to be torn up and redone because it's extremely dangerous? It's all split and falling apart, and people could trip and whatnot, and you're going to have potentially, you know, a lot more people living here, obviously, as you say, and going to the T and all. So it is a hazard, that stretch of Bennington Street. So is that the city's responsibility to fix that, or are you going to be undertaking it as a project?
And you're talking about from Bennington Street all the way down to the train station? Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm really talking about, let's say the Bennington Street, you know, where the salon is at the corner of Layden and Bennington. There's like a crosswalk there, and then to the strip of Bennington Street right before you turn into where the Cascade Company was. I'm not talking about a huge slab of Bennington Street. I'm talking specifically the Bennington Street that runs along parallel to this site.
Yeah, you know what? We haven't gotten that far with PIC. Oftentimes, they don't want to spend the money, but it's going to be important for us to improve the site. We would take something like that on, and I just want to share an example with you too. So if you ever have a chance, and I'm sure you know Addison Street. Addison Street is a very dark street, particularly at night. It had a terrible sidewalk condition. We actually improved the entire sidewalk from Saratoga all the way down to McClellan Highway. You know, way more than where our project site is, because it was that important to us. And so I think that's a wonderful comment. And if that's a comment you could potentially include whenever, you know, that's something we would definitely address, because it helps the community, and obviously
absolutely. Yeah, it's I mean, it sort of negates the, you know, what you're proposing here. I mean, if you have this sidewalk that's, you know, all uneven and cracks and this and that, I mean, you know, it's an opportunity to improve the neighborhood, obviously. And I think there are opportunities to do that. That leads me to my question about the marsh. You're saying you're interviewing scientists and whatnot. So that is going to be a long-term commitment on your part, correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some level of implementation that we're going to be doing as part of our work. And that's a scope that we're going to be addressing with the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh as well as DCR, since we don't own the property. But absolutely. And then in terms of, I don't know what the long-term nature is of potentially some of the things that we'll be doing, but clearly the marsh needs a lot of help.
Yeah.
And one project here cannot solve that by itself. Part of the discussion that we're going to have with the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh is about direct implementation and then long-term strategies for other aspects. It's kind of southwest section of the marsh, and I don't want to speak for anybody in the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh because they obviously know the marsh better than I do or anybody of our team because they've spent so much time and energy thinking about it and advocating for it. What we have noticed and what we have become to understand is that this southwest section of the marsh is degraded. It's degraded because tidal pathways have been cut off, and also during the 1930s, mosquito ditches were dug. And so there are other marshes, in Massachusetts that are going through restoration projects. I can't commit to you and say we're going to restore the marsh. We can't commit a $10 million, $20 million restoration. I don't even know what it costs at this stage. And that's one of the reasons why we want to bring a wetland scientist on with input from the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh to talk about a direct scope of work that we're going to do as part of our work. And then also trying to figure out a game plan to help restore and revive portions of the marsh. And that's going to obviously be a longer term funding strategy. And one thing that we want to do is also be part of that solution. And so this is going to be a broader discussion. We're going to have a BPDA public meeting. We're not going to have all the answers, but we're going to hopefully outline a strategy and we will seek input. And this is going to be a separate meeting associated solely with the marsh. The marsh is a critical natural resource for us, obviously for the community. It's a beloved resource, and we want to do what we can to obviously help ensure its health and obviously help improve it as well too.
Okay. And my last and my final comment is, Tony read my comment. Is there a compromise? I mean, is there some sort of, with all of this, with everybody's input, the abutters input, most importantly, about the traffic, the people on Palermo and Swan do not want people to come out of this section, this complex and take a right. Is there some sort of compromise or a commitment to the abutters that can be made, saying there's going to be a stoplight there, there's going to be a no right turn sign there, et cetera, et cetera. Also compromise on the height of the building. We've heard that several times from various folks and abutters and whatnot, as well as Gail. She's close by as well. I mean, it's all, this neighborhood is zoned for 1, 2, and 3-story buildings. And I understand what you're saying about, this is a different it's a different layout. It's an industrial building right now. It was, at least, and it's an opportunity to build, et cetera, et cetera. But what is the compromise that can be made? I mean, is 5 units the get-go? That's the deal breaker, or can it be? Can you have a compromise? Can it be maybe 1 floor lower, maybe lower floors on certain buildings? Because it's sort of like this mishmash of buildings. It's like this U-shaped building and then a little thing and then another building. So is there some opportunity to have compromise somewhere on the height of the building? I think if you show that to the community, I really think that will show everyone, the abutters, the Orient Heights community, anybody else who's going to come in and, have the retail space with your support, that will show everybody that you're committed to working with the community.
Yeah, Joanne, I think that's a very fair comment. And I just want to reiterate to everybody, I think some people have expressed some concern that like after this meeting or after the comment period that it was associated with the PNF, everything's a done deal. That's not how this process works for a large scale project. We are just at the beginning of our review, and the purpose of having all of these meetings is to take in all of these comments and then to get to a point that hopefully responds effectively to what's being asked, but at the same time doesn't penalize the project to the point where it can't be physically built, right? If things are piled on one side, then maybe things can't be compromised on the other. But if there's flexibility on both sides, then I think we can reach to a point that's going to work for everybody. But we're just starting this process. And the way this process progresses is us having continuous meetings or continual meetings. It's the submission of comments that are going to occur here. There's going to be another round of comments that's going to absolutely happen. And then the BPDA is going to take all of those comments and issue a document to us that's going to say, please address all of these key points. And these are some of the key points that we're hearing and the most important points. And we're going to have to get to a point that works for everybody. So I just want to assure everybody, we're just really starting our review process. Like Gail mentioned, there's a lot of questions here and nobody is intending to answer all of them tonight. There's going to be many other opportunities to do this. And hopefully we can work together to get to something that works for everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had a couple more traffic / parking related questions from Larry Venezia in the chat, asking, what about the 100 cars looking for parking every night? And transit oriented, what happens when the blue line cars are full or the blue line breaks down?
So, this exact same question has come up on previous meetings, I think multiple times, and I'm going to give the same answer, which is, this is not our first building as it relates to trying to determine what parking demand will be. Somebody looks at this building and says, you're going to have 3 units, three parking spaces per unit, because that's what I see in my neighborhood in a triple decker. You have to understand what's being planned here. We have a variety of unit types, including studios, 1 bedrooms, some 2 bedrooms, and then I don't believe we're proposing any 3 bedrooms at this stage. But you have to look at the unit mix to understand, and you have to look at the demographics of who's going to be living here. We have built buildings with a parking ratio of 0.5 in areas that are adjacent to transit, and that to our understanding, and it's been validated by other buildings, is the right parking ratio for this type of building sitting next to transit. The last thing we want to do is, people complain about traffic. I don't think you want to see more cars on the street. And at the same time, we don't want to overbuild the parking, because that just adds additional costs and prevents us from compromising on other issues. So we believe we've submitted a traffic study, a parking study. We believe we've proven out that this is the right parking ratio. We've built it in other buildings. We have not had any issues. And there will not be 100 cars looking for parking spaces in your neighborhood, because the demand will not be there. And as it relates to the T, yeah, the T has issues, but there are other modes of transportation as well too. We hope the T is highly utilized, and we hope that there's going to be additional capacity on it based upon what we know and what we've seen in the past, particularly here this far up the line. We feel that that's going to be a strong alternative for people, in addition to all the other things people do now, whether it's bicycling, Ubers, Lyfts, their own cars. This is supposed to be a multimodal location.
It looks like that is all of the questions. There was another one just kind of echoing the parking issue sentiment from John and Ginny Bertulli.
Yeah, parking is always one of the main concerns. It always is. Everyone thinks the building's under park and people are going to be cruising around for parking spaces. This is not a triple decker with 8 people living in one unit or a large family. You're going to see a lot of single individuals here, a lot of people who don't drive cars. And I just want to use an anecdote, and I don't mean to compare markets because they're 2 different buildings. When we built 500 Ocean Avenue, which is a large project, 305 units on Revere Beach, that project had already been permitted under a master plan. So in order for us to build that building, we had to conform to that master plan. We could design the building any way we wanted to, the way it looked like, but there were certain things we had to conform to, and one of them was a parking ratio. That building had been permitted 10 years prior as part of the overall master plan. So we were required to build 1.35 parking spaces per dwelling unit. We are sitting on 200 vacant car spaces because people don't have cars like the way it is being portrayed tonight. That building sits right on transit, very proximate, just like this building. And we probably wasted $20 million on building parking, and that money could have gone to something else.
We have a question from Patricia Venezia asking, how does this improve Palermo, as you mentioned? I think because there were mentions earlier in the presentation about improvements to Palermo Street.
Amy, would you mind bringing that up, or maybe, I don't know if Sean's on, or who has kind of the best understanding or description that they could talk about Palermo, maybe showing some of the sections as well too.
Yeah, so we can talk through it in a few ways. Currently, it's a pretty tight angle and a very wide intersection, and I think Brian is on as well. So Brian, feel free to jump in and support the architects and landscape architects. But right now, there's not great sight lines going out. There's it's a pretty, as I mentioned, a tight angle, and our hope and with the plan that the city has put forward is really to make that a straight street. What we don't show in this drawing, we cut it off, was really that continuation of that street would be straight as it intersects Bennington Street. So coming in at the more traditional 90-degree angle, which makes it safer for both cars and pedestrians. And yeah, I mean, I know the question was raised on the stoplight, which, Brian, I think you mentioned before, potential.
Yeah, sorry about that. I am outside. So yeah, the intent is to tighten up the intersection and make it more standard, so it comes into Bennington at a 90-degree angle. So it'd be standardized and simpler and more typical for drivers. Obviously, everyone that lives on Palermo, you're through it enough, so it makes sense to you. But when you have drivers that are that aren't as used to it as you are, it could be uncomfortable for them. So, and then for the signal, you can't put in signals unless you meet warrants, and there's a bunch of different warrants. There's 9 total, but most of them are based on volumes, and the volumes, you need to have a certain level of volume either during peak hours or over the course of a day, and in order to put in a signal, and we're not at that point, right? Even there's different ways to calculate it, and no matter which way we try and looked at it, we didn't hit the thresholds for putting in a signal.
And I'll just chime in on behalf of Sean. That additional green space is allowing us more length to essentially more flatten out the sidewalk. Right now, it's steep and it's not accessible. It's more than 8% slope. 5% slope. So now we're bringing it under 5% slope. So it's an accessible sidewalk all the way up around, from Bennington down around to Austin Ave.
Larry Zola said 1 lane on Bennington, so probably a steady line of cars, and you need to make a sudden right-hand turn, or a tight right turn, sorry.
Yeah, and again, the idea is to make it 90 degrees, so it wouldn't be tight. It would just be your typical right turn.
And that single lane that's shown is not something that we're proposing. That was something that was included as Plan East Boston, and that's up for discussion in an additional study. So we're not going to be changing the condition as it stands now, except for the work we want to do on Palermo to improve that and make that turn safer.
Let's see. Gail Miller said, does the development team know that Bennington is a speedway and it will absolutely, maybe it will be absolutely dangerous coming out of that project? I think the idea behind narrowing all of the streets in Orient Heights, though, is to slow everything down, like what they're doing over on Boardman Street, making them narrower.
That's exactly right. And that's, you know, the point. Boardman is tighter. Boardman at Ashley Street, and the point is to make it more standard so people don't go fast and don't go through the intersection and treat it as a yield. And then also, as you're coming down Ashley Street, you now kind of veer to the left and you hit Boardman again at a 90-degree angle. So it's a more standard intersection. And what's been done so far with the paint is just the interim, or, you know, it's kind of like a pilot program. If it works as well as the city expects, then the city would come back and put in curbing to solidify that. So it's even more prominent than what it is now.
And Tony, what do you think about the mural on Boardman and Ashley?
Is it finished? I've only seen like part of it in driving by.
Yeah, no, I think it's still a work in progress the last time I saw it, but you know, that's obviously a program that the city was trying to institute. It's something that we funded in order to do that, and we went through an art selection process. So I'm just curious what people thought about it.
It's definitely noticeable. A lot better than the road cones, for sure.
And Larry believes it's very distracting.
Let's see. I don't see any more comments in the chat. And just so everyone knows, I have been taking notes, including like the questions and responses, so I can pass them along after this meeting.
Yeah, and Tony, if we missed anything, please send us the questions. And I'm hoping somebody on our team was doing that as well too. We would be happy to respond in writing to any questions that were missed and pass it along that way.
Right. Well, if there are no additional questions or comments on this project at this time, which it seems like there is, unless anyone unmutes or raises their hand or says anything in the chat. Sometimes like I'll start being like, oh, looks like we're done. And then like 15 questions pop up, but I think we're looking good. So thank you so much for presenting and answering everyone's questions. When you do the presentation on the marsh, would you be able to send that over to us just so we can pass it along to folks who maybe aren't able to attend? That would be awesome.
Yeah, 100%. We'll probably need to submit that to the city early as well too. We're beginning to work on a rough draft tomorrow. We don't have a meeting scheduled yet. We've asked the BPDA to schedule that in coordination with the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh. But yes, absolutely, we'll pass it along.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, everyone have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.